Okay, a quick vertical scan. I've got a verb issue. Union would finally acknowledge, to finally acknowledge, having finally finally acknowledging. So, okay, this is going to be a finite versus non-finite verb issue, where again, the non-finite is the infinitive, to run, or the participle. So to acknowledge is the infinitive, having acknowledged is a participle, acknowledging is a participle. These are all non-finite answers. Would finally acknowledge, would acknowledge. So the mood there might actually be subjunctive, but I don't think that matters so much. This is a finite. It's a main verb conjugation. So let's see what we need here. In 94, almost 200 years after the death of Wang Zhenyi, the International Astronomical Union, finally acknowledging the contributions of the barrier-breaking 18th century astronomer and author of this book, comma, naming a crater on Venus after. No, afterward, this is dependent. This is a dependent clause. I need this to be part of a main independent clause verb conjugation because naming is another participle here. So I need the finite verb. A is going to be our answer. Let's just read that through. In 94, almost 200 years after the death of such and such, the IAU would finally acknowledge the contributions of the barrier-breaking 18th century astronomer and blah, 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 naming a crater after her. That's right. We need a main verb conjugation there. Sorry about my voice cracking. I was losing it in the last day or two. A is the answer. Okay, here I do a quick vertical scan. I see some longer answers, and I see a noun, and then kind of reaching some kind of verb or when, some kind of relative pronoun. I think, not entirely sure, but I think this is going to be a modifier issue. So if that's the case, let's check if we've got some kind of dependent clause, comma. And yes, the second sentence, a nearly frictionless state, comma. That's dependent clause or phrase, comma. And then what's going to have to be a noun. So we have to fill in what noun is a nearly frictionless state. And as its name suggests, extremely slippery. Okay. So is when their COF drops a nearly frictionless state? Is that a noun? No, that's not even a noun. That's a relative clause. Two surfaces, that is a noun. So a nearly frictionless state, two surfaces, when their COF drops, reach superlubricity. I don't think that's right. Doesn't quite sound right, but possible. Let's keep that open for now. Reaching superlubricity occurs. So a nearly frictionless state, reaching superlubricity? No. I don't think the reaching of this superlubricity, I'm going to mispronounce that one, is what we're talking about as a nearly frictionless surface. I think superlubricity itself is a nearly frictionless state and extremely slippery. I think that's going to be the right answer. A nearly frictionless state, superlubricity, is reached when two surfaces, COF dropla. That's it. D is our right answer. Superlubricity is the correct noun that the previous dependent phrase is modifying, or dependent clause. D is right. Okay, 20, quick vertical scan. I've got R is, so this is verb, tense, and number, essentially. And that's plural R, singular is, past were, or have been. Let's see what we have here. Studying terracotta, the thousands of lice statues of warriors found near the tomb of emperor. So this is dependent. I can pull this out. So researchers studying the terracotta army were shocked to realize that the shape of each statue's ears, comma, like the shape of each person's ears. So what's the noun we're going to be referring to? The subject noun for is, are, whatever. The shape. It's going to be the shape, not of ears. That's in the preposition. The shape, which is singular, that's going to be our subject noun to the verb, is unique. So researchers studying wouldn't say the shape were or have been. Well, that's plural too, as that is plural. This is just simply the singular answer that tells us B is the answer. It's singular. Okay, quick vertical scan here. A little longer, not too long, but Henry resumed the reign of Henry. Henry's reign. So I've got the apostrophe, and then I have the verb right away. I can tell this structure is going to be a modifier issue. Okay. How do I know that? Well, it's a little bit longer, and I have nouns, but I have different forms of nouns, not just Henry, but the reign of Henry, or Henry's reign, which basically is the same as the reign of Henry. That apostrophe is always often a tip-off. And then one of the three is some kind of verb or pronoun, something other than what's likely to be the noun that's correctly being modified. These are tip-offs of modifier, misplaced modifier issues. The other way I can check, of course, is it's going to be structured as a dependent clause, and this is. It's a preposition upon recovering 2 years later, dependent clause or phrase, comma, and then we have to fill in the noun, the correct noun. So what recovered 2 years later? Henry? Yes, Henry would recover. The reign of Henry recovered 2 years later? I mean, that's possible, I guess, but it doesn't really make sense. So it's not the reign of Henry or Henry's reign, which are basically the same answer and therefore wrong. And it's not, it was Henry who written. No, that's a verb structure. It is not that. That's equivalent to our there is, there are. It's always wrong. So upon recovering 2 years later, Henry, that's the correct noun to be modified. Forcing and angered Richard from the royal court and precipitating a series of battles later known as the War of the Roses. So, hold on. That might not be it. Henry resumed. Yeah, no, Henry resumed his reign. I'm sorry. It's not just Henry, because then this would not be a sentence. There's no independent clause. But Henry resumed his reign. Yes, correct. Sorry, I missed that for a second. Upon recovering 2 years later, Henry resumed his reign, and then, comma, this participle dependent clause afterward, forcing and precipitating. That would be a full sentence with a complete thought. A is, in fact, the right answer, and Henry is the correct noun that's modified by the dependent clause before it. Okay, so what do we have here? Being, to be, to have been, will be. Okay, this is participle, infinitive, with a perfect, will be. This is, okay, so this looks like it's actually going to be a non-finite. We've got three non-finites, which is often the case. In other words, they can't be conjugated. They're the infinitive, the participle, and we've got one finite, which is one verb that can be or is essentially a conjugation for a main part of the sentence, for the independent clause. Will be. That's a future tense of the to be verb. So let's see, which is it going to be here? So a model created by a biologist, such and such, predicts that the rate of speciation, and we can just pull this parenthetical out, on an isolated island located approximately 5,000 kilometers from the nearest mainland, will be triple the rate of speciation on an island only 500 kilometers from the mainland. Yeah, it's not going to be non-finite. Otherwise, we would not have a full sentence. We wouldn't have a main verb conjugation in here. So it has to be the finite answer. And by the way, another tip off there is that, where was it? That, whenever we have that, what has to follow is a finite conjugated verb. So the boy that runs, the boy that will run. You wouldn't say the boy that running. Wouldn't be the boy that to run. You wouldn't use a non-finite after that. It's going to be finite. So 22, the correct answer is D.